Let's start with a picture. Imagine a massive, publicly traded company. We're talking thousands of employees, billions of dollars in revenue. On the surface, it looks like an absolute titan of industry. But what if deep down, underneath all that gloss, the foundations are actually starting to crack?
That right there is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? How can anyone, investors, employees, you, me, how can we know if a company is truly stable or if it's just one bad quarter away from a total disaster? Well, it turns out there's a type of professional whose entire job is to answer that very question.
That's right. We're talking about the auditor. But for this explainer, I want you to just completely forget that old stereotype of a quiet bookkeeper in the back room. Instead, I want you to think of them as a detective. In the annual audit, that's a full-blown investigation into a company's financial health. Their prime directive is to figure out one thing. Is this company actually built to last?
Okay, so every good investigation has to start with understanding the rules of the game, right? So first, let's set the scene and get a handle on the one fundamental principle that governs this entire process.
This right here, this is the bedrock of pretty much all financial reporting. It's called the going concern assumption. It's basically the default belief that a company is going to keep its stores open and isn't planning to go bankrupt tomorrow. I mean, without this basic assumption, financial statements would be kind of useless. The detective's job is to challenge this very assumption.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because it highlights a crucial division of labor. Think of it like a courtroom drama. Management, they're the primary witness. They have the first job, the main responsibility, to look at their own company's health and present their case. But the auditor is the detective. They can't just take management's word for it. No way. Their job is to go out and independently verify that story, hunting for evidence that either backs it up or, completely tears it apart.
All right, so with the ground rules established, our detective now begins the real work. It's time to start looking for clues, for any little sign that the official story doesn't quite add up. In other words, they're on the hunt for red flags.
You know, a good detective doesn't just start knocking on random doors, right? They start by sizing up the whole situation, getting the lay of the land, and figuring out where the potential problems might be hiding. For an auditor, this is what we call the risk assessment phase. It's all about figuring out where the company is most vulnerable.
So what do these red flags actually look like? Well, they usually fall into three main categories. First up, you've got your financial indicators. These are the obvious ones, like if the company is consistently losing money or having a really hard time paying its bills. Then you have operational indicators. This could be something like losing a huge customer or maybe a bunch of key executives suddenly quit. And finally, there are other potential issues, things like major lawsuits or brand new regulations that could seriously threaten the whole business. Any one of these could be that crucial clue that cracks the case wide open.
So, finding a red flag is one thing, but a detective needs a lot more than just a gut feeling or a suspicion. They need cold, hard evidence. And that brings us to the next phase, actually building the case. This is the real legwork of the investigation. The auditor digs deep. They're poring over minutes from board meetings, they're performing very specific tests on the financial data, and, this is a big one, they're analyzing the company's cash flow forecasts to see if their plans are even remotely realistic. They also have to look at something called subsequent events, which is just a fancy way of saying things that happen after the financial year ends but before the report is published. A last-minute event that could change everything.
And I want to be clear, this is not guesswork. This investigation follows a really structured and methodical plan, a lot like the one you're seeing here. It moves logically from figuring out who's responsible for what, to planning the audit, to gathering all the evidence, and then, finally, reporting the conclusions. Every single step is designed to lead to a verdict that's based on facts, not feelings.
So the really crucial point here is that this isn't just about what happened last year. It's not about looking in the rearview mirror. It's a forward-looking exercise. The auditor has to really consider if the company can survive for at least the next 12 months. And often, they're required to look even further out than that, taking into account any known storm clouds on the horizon. All right, so after all the clues have been followed, all the evidence is gathered and analyzed, our detective has to do the absolute hardest part of their job, deliver the verdict. This is that moment of truth, the final conclusion that gets captured in the audit report for the whole world to see. So what happens? Well, the outcome of the investigation determines the final verdict. If everything checks out, the company gets what's called a clean opinion. All good. Now, if there are some doubts but management has been totally transparent about them, the auditor still gives a clean opinion but adds a special paragraph just to flag that concern for investors. But
And this is the big one. If the auditor finds major doubts that management hasn't disclosed, that's when the alarm bells start ringing loud and clear. They'll issue a modified opinion, and that is a serious red flag that can send stock prices tumbling and scare investors away.
And the investigation doesn't just end with a public report. Nope. The auditor also has to communicate their findings directly to the people at the top, the company's board of directors or the audit committee. This makes sure that the people in charge are fully aware of any risks and that nothing important gets swept under the rug. It's really the final piece of accountability in the whole process.
So there you have it. The auditor's report gives us this crucial snapshot of a company's health, a verdict from our financial detective. But at the end of the day, it's just that, a snapshot in time. And in a world that changes as fast as ours, with so much disruption, it really raises a final question. What does it even mean for a business to be built to last? I guess the next time you look at a company's annual report, you'll know exactly what to look for.